There we
Hi,
go.
guys.
All right.
So I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us tonight and tomorrow. I think there's a lot that we could all learn from each other. Even in the breakouts, we learn from each other and empower each other during a time where we're all looking for some type of empowerment. So thank you for everyone for sharing and joining today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about. I guess the topic of my speech is pivoting. So I want to change the topic a little bit and call it pivoting with purpose. So I started my career at University of Miami with Hernan. We actually had the same major, so we were both in international finance and marketing. A little personal note about myself: both my mother and my father were in banking. They both retired in banking. Very driven, very accounting driven, very wanted me to take the same path. So I needed to at least study because it was the a piece that would family feel like leading in their path as well. Um, but it wasn't something that provided me passion. Um, as I kind of grew in my career, my first couple of jobs were actually in sales. I did go to the University of Miami and study international finance and marketing, and then went for my master's in marketing. And I wanted to work for great brands. I wanted to work in marketing. I wanted to drive strategy. That's where I went first. And then I had an amazing opportunity that came up um, at Royal Caribbean, and it was in a finance role within a sales and marketing organization. So I said, well, why not? I've got a finance background. It can never hurt to be more financially driven. So I spent some time in a department called revenue management in the travel industry. That's where you set pricing and strategic profits for certain areas of the company. So I thought it was kind of interesting. It was based on economics, supply and demand. So I did that for a couple of years. Still a lot of interactions with marketing, and but I still had a little bit inside of me that said there's something about these roles that isn't exactly what I like, and kind of going back to something Alicia said as well, I felt a little odd. So I knew that I was in this finance role, but I knew I didn't quite fit. I had maybe too many opinions. Really wanted to be more on the strategic side, and in finance, that's not necessarily the way that the culture works in finance. It's a very top-down kind of hierarchy in finance. The longer you are in finance, the more you know, and really it's a little bit different culture, right? Um, so then I decided I wanted to try a role in marketing, which is the area I was interested in. Spent some time in that. Again, I definitely felt a passion for that side of the business, but I really liked was really looking at implement a strategy and automate doing in a way. And I always liked the process side of the business. So I always found a piece of something that I was doing that I really enjoyed, but wanted to do it full time. So in 2010, there were some changes at Royal Caribbean where I was at, and I ended up losing my job. Probably at the worst time as an adult that I could. I had two small children. I had just bought a new house, and really was doing really well financially. And I realized that if I was ever going to make a change, this would be the time to make it. There was a portion of me that just was not happy and wanted to really go down the path of technology. I want to completely ignore what I knew in sales and marketing from before, and even in finance. So I wanted to apply that to what I was doing. So I ended up taking a role as a product development role in a smaller company. As part of that role, I was able to implement a brand new ERP system, which is basically an accounting system, and the system that runs a whole company. They were a small company at the time. They were a $15 million company that year, so we were a startup. By the time I left, they were 50 million, which for a small company with the same number of employees, it's a pretty amazing change. A lot of that had to do with becoming more efficient. So I had the opportunity, even in a small company, to really apply what I was interested in, which is really process improvement and automation. So I ended up implementing a new ERP. I also implemented Salesforce.com, and through that interaction, I ended up working in consulting. So I went even further. At that point, I made a completely hard a pivot to technology and said, I really don't want to go back to finance. That's not my passion. I really want to get into somewhere where I can make a strategic decision in a very short amount of time with the experience I had already, right? So I had working at Royal Caribbean, my last role at Royal Caribbean, I was a finance manager for sales and marketing. So I managed a budget of $350 million a year, which is not a small amount of money. 16 different cost centers across the United States. It was a lot. I had a pretty good team, pretty good sized team. And so I learned a lot about that process and how to get things approved, how to move the needle when you want to get something done, how to work with the technology team. So all of that I brought to the pivot. So I ended up becoming a consultant as part of our company again, doing implementations with companies anywhere from 100 employees up to 2,000 employees. We actually never had a project with Bank of America, but we did work with a few banks here in Miami and in the FinServe space. But it was pretty interesting. I found myself in kind of an odd spot again. I was working in a role where I had maybe 3 years of experience, but I had to learn. So the pivot there was take everything you know, and then spend every night that you can and every hour that you've got learning the other side that you need to be an expert in. And that really was going online, watching as much as I could about the technologies I was implementing, reading books, reading stories about people that implemented what we were doing. And within 3 years, I was able to completely kind of reshuffle everything on my resume to look like I was a technologist. So with an expertise in sales. The hard part of all of that is you would think it would be learning the technologies and being involved in a completely different role. That actually wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was a cultural change. I went from being in an organization, especially with finance, where as you kind of grow with the organization and you build the expertise, people listen to you, no questions asked. Moving into technology, it's completely different. It's almost like managing a basketball team, right? So if you think about your typical owner of a team, they're in their 50s to early 70s. They're managing talent that is super important to the profit of that company, but they're in their 20s. So now here you are in your 50s or 60s, you're a millionaire and you own this team, and now you've got to cater and listen to people that are younger than you. Well, that's IT. That's basically the hard shift, and that was becoming humble, listening to other individuals that may know more about the technology than you do, and finding a way to bring people together so you deliver a better product. So having those different points of view, and something Kerry mentioned as well, you bringing those two sets of points of view together in a constructive way is probably the biggest talent that I learned through that process. It's not what you know, and it's not what I tell you, and you have to finish it by this point. And it's recognizing people for what they bring to the table, and recognizing people that don't bring things to the table, and which is equally as difficult. You may have somebody who's very seasoned, but isn't delivering the same amount of value as somebody who's not as seasoned, but is just a star. So that hard pivot was probably one of the hardest things I had to learn, is really to sit back and listen. As a leader, that's not the easiest thing to do, especially when you come into and you're already. I was already in my early 40s. I was actually 41 when I changed over to that role, and that's a pretty big shift at that time. Be honest, I've never looked back. It's been an amazing change. I think I've spoken at University of Miami and a couple of times and other events, and my advice to everyone is every role that we have, every role that we think we're going to have in the future is going to be impacted by technology. The question is, what portion of it do you want to participate in? In my case, I didn't want to be automated. I wanted to be driving the automation. I wanted to be driving the current role. I'm responsible for data governance across Rider. So data governance really is about keeping your most important data, clean and concise, especially your master data. Customer records are an example of that. Without good customer records, you really can't do anything. You can't market. You don't know who's generating the most revenue. And that really came from that pivot as well, under where the money is, and how to get that ROI out of the data. So I really have enjoyed the shift, and I challenge everybody who is not completely satisfied with what they're doing. Take a hard look at what you're doing today, and if that's really a passion. If you don't have passion in what you do, you're not going to develop an expertise. People are not going to pay you. I remember Hernan said something to me that really stuck with me during that time period, is that he never applied for a job. They always came to him, and they sought after him because of his expertise. And I wanted that to be me. I wanted people to reach out to me and offer me a job, as opposed to me chasing them down for a position. And that's really been the shift, is really kind of building that expertise. And one of the tips that a lot of the young adults that we work with don't realize is you can quickly build an expertise in this market in 3 to 5 years. So if you really become an expert in a certain area, it could be website design, it can be in the music industry, it can be in whatever it is. But if you dedicate the time and you build a path to that, and you tell your story and you build your brand, that can happen very quickly. I've seen people, double their salaries inside of 3 years because they build an expertise in a certain area that, is just sought after. Data science in my world is a big part of that. I mean, there's data scientists that are coming into different roles in our company and across different role, and they're getting paid as much as executives. and that's because that expertise is being sought after, and you're talking about people with 3 to 5 years of experience. So it's not a bad thing to take a pivot. It's a bad thing to take a pivot if you can't continue to build that expertise down a certain path. So I challenge everybody to keep learning. It's a scary thing, to be in your 40s and say, maybe finance wasn't exactly what I needed to learn. Maybe I really need to get much more technical. Before that hard shift happened, I just did not dedicate as much time as I should have to learning. So keep learning, challenge yourself, at work and off work. We had a group before that we were talking, and one of the things that I have a lot of passion for is sports. My black belt in Taekwondo. I got to tell you, one of the scariest things I've ever experienced is doing my black belt test. I do not have a good memory. I had to memorize 15 forms. They're about 3 minutes a piece. They're very technical, and you have multiple masters watching you do this. It is terrible for somebody who doesn't have a good memory. But once you get through that, you realize, it may be a small piece of what you're going to do in your life, but challenging yourself is really, really important. And you're only limited by what you're willing to work on. If you're willing to put in the time, and you draw your own future, everyone here on this call has the ability to make that change. For me, it was a change in technology, and it's something I'm so passionate about. I'm so happy. And having people around you like Hernan and this team here. I mean, Hernan, I probably talked to him every day when I was making that transition, and he encouraged me a lot. And I gave that back to him, and when he was having some times of conflict as well, and we all have them, and but we all have that power inside of us. You just got to paint your future, and you got to take it as quickly as you can. Take massive action and do it. So
yeah, no, thank you, Ignacio, for
that's all I
sharing
got.
that. No worries. And I love how, kind of relating back to Alicia's point, I wouldn't really say it was a pivot, kind of just learning from your experiences. It was more kind of like you created your own path each time. You took the initiative.
There were small pivots, yes.
Yeah, small pivots, but you took the initiative, the courage to learn on your own and go further. So that's courage that a lot of people don't have. So Thank you for sharing. And
You're welcome.
due to the sake of time, I'll allow one question if anybody has in the audience, a quick question. You can unmute yourself.
I'll ask one.
Sure.
Sure.
Phenomenal career path.
Thank
You and I crossed paths a couple times, and unfortunately, I wish we would have had the opportunity to work together. I think we would have done great things.
Right.
You talk about these pivots, and sometimes the pivots are not easy to adjust to move forward. You talked about Hernan being that rock. What would be your advice to these young people that today are in a career and may stay in that career their entire path, or may pivot 2 or 3 times? And I'm very much like you. I'm in a totally different field today. What would you use? What would you tell them to motivate them and not be fearful of taking that next step?
I think you have to have a good mentorship as well. I've talked to young adults, and they've brought ideas to me and they said, "Hey, I'm in my last year at UM and I studied finance and I decided I want to be in web design." And all this time getting into college, you just finished your finance degree and now you want to hard pivot to something that's completely different. Clearly, somebody hasn't talked you're passionate about before you got to that stage, and you need the tough love, and that's the part of being a good mentor. It's not just about building people up, but it's also trusting their advice. You need to have that trust to share something with them and say, I really don't think that's a great idea what you're thinking of doing, or wow, that's I'm surprised you didn't do that before, and that's really, really important. And if you don't trust one person, get 2 mentors. But getting good advice is probably the most important component of this, because I have seen some really poorly executed pivots and some really, really good pivots. I know Guillermo, you and I kind of share that background to a certain extent of being in finance and then going over to technology. And I see your face and I see your facial expression, and I could tell you're so much happier in your current role, and that's how I feel as well. It is such a good change for me, and the people around me that care about me and give me good advice continue to encourage me, and Hernan is one of those people that has given me good advice. That's why you guys are here. The benefit of where you are is you're getting advice from people that have gone through these trenches. Everybody has a struggle. Everybody moves to a new place or feels a little bit odd in their new role, or does really bad in one semester of college and thinks they'll never get a job. Everybody goes things. Everybody finds himself in certain scenarios, and that's what our mentor could really help with. So you guys are in the right place.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ignacio. And
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Moving on, I know Sam is raising his hand. Maybe you guys can take the conversation offline.
Sure.
But moving on to the next segment, just for the interest of time, I will be putting everybody into breakout rooms once again. And this will be kind of a networking breakout room with activity. Nothing crazy, no need to write out a business plan, but I'll put the activity in the chat room once I put you guys into breakout rooms. And we'll meet, so right now it's 8:43, so we'll meet in approximately 10 minutes at 8:55, which I think should be more than enough. So give me 1 second.